On June 22, 1944, at 6:47 a.m., Corporal Jack McKeever ignored burst fire protocols. He reconfigured his Browning M2 heavy machine gun for a single pinpoint shot against Japanese positions. He dragged the weapon into place, coral crushed beneath the steel tripod. Setting up 38 kilograms of ordnance required strict physical leverage. McKeever locked the heavy receiver. He adjusted the traverse mechanism. 19 Marines had been killed in 48 hours. 11 enemy sniper teams operated across the volcanic ridges. The target sat approximately 1,460 meters away. At this distance, standard infantry combat was considered physically impossible. Small arms bullets lacked the kinetic energy to reach the high ground. The M2 featured a 1,143 millimeter barrel engineered for continuous barrages. Military manuals dictated the use of this weapon exclusively for area suppression. Those 19 casualties became a direct consequence of strict military doctrine. The command expected gunners to maintain a wide dispersion arc, ignoring pinpoint accuracy. The Japanese observers understood this perfectly, lighting cigarettes in plain sight on the ridges. A heavy weapon designed to destroy transport trucks now aimed directly at a single infantryman. At Camp Pendleton, the training focused on the mechanical purpose of the .50 caliber platform. Ordnance engineers developed the 12.7 millimeter projectile, carrying 45 grams of mass to penetrate steel armor rather than soft human tissue. Technical specifications listed an effective range of 1,645 meters against vehicles. The manual required the operator to scatter these massive rounds across a designated zone to suppress enemy movement. The enemy snipers relied on this predictable tactic while shifting between elevated bunkers. The distance shielded them from standard infantry rifles, and the sweeping machine gun fire remained too inaccurate to hit hidden targets. McKeever removed his hands from the grips and stopped the continuous bursts. Sergeant Thomas Harding dragged a replacement ammunition belt toward the emplacement. Abandoning standard area fire demanded a complete mechanical lockdown. Sweat drops hissed against the heated steel receiver shell. Corporal Jack McKeever adjusted the traverse dials on the M3 tripod. He carefully locked the horizontal aiming mechanism. Heavy, stacked sandbags pinned the traverse slide bar firmly in place. This rigid barrier eliminated all residual weapon vibration during target acquisition. The deliberate mechanical fixation restricted the lateral barrel sweep entirely. Its massive metal tripod absorbed the immense recoil energy. The heavy mount anchored the kick of the .50 caliber cartridge. The area suppression platform became an ultra-heavy, stationary rifle. Over 3 continuous days of sniper attacks, the unit mapped the terrain. The hidden Japanese slope stood exactly 1,460 meters away. Standard tactical directives proved entirely useless at this specific operational range. Deep silence finally replaced the deafening roar of continuous suppressive fire. A rigidly locked barrel required dedicated optics to locate the target. 4-power magnification over a distance of nearly 1.5 kilometers. The gunner pressed his eye against a salvaged rifle sight. The glass produced a distorted image of the Japanese positions. Heat waves warped the view. Detecting movement at this scale pushed the physical limits of the small lenses. The target emerged near the third cave from the left. A silhouette shifted behind rocks. The official manual listed the maximum effective range for point targets at 1,645 meters. Theoretical numbers rarely matched battlefield reality. A human torso at that distance appeared smaller than the optical crosshairs. The weak magnification clashed directly with the raw ballistic potential of the heavy ammunition. Standard rifles lacked the kinetic energy for this extreme distance. The heavy barrel provided stability, yet the factory weapon design contradicted this precise application. Heavy machine guns were created exclusively for fire density. Optics only solved detection. Physics remained the primary barrier at this long distance. 880 meters per second at the muzzle, The heavy bullet left the chamber with a velocity exceeding the standard American infantry rifle. The M1 Garand peaked at 850 meters per second, but at this extended range, gravity tore the trajectory downward. The projectile dropped 2.4 meters. Flight time equaled 1.75 seconds. Crosswinds pushed the heavy mass off course during this long transit. Movement flashed inside the optical glass. A Japanese soldier emerged from the third cave. He carried an Arisaka rifle equipped with a telescopic sight. He walked without haste across the open ground. The wide valley put him far beyond the effective reach of standard American infantry fire. He felt completely secure. The gunner reached into his pocket and pulled out a crushed cigarette pack. The damp cardboard smelled of stale tobacco and wet paper. He flipped the box over to the blank side. A pencil carved wind, drift adjustments, and elevation data directly into the white surface. These field calculations translated hunting experience into a specific firing solution. The target moved toward an elevated ridgeline. The Japanese sniper settled into a firing position behind a fallen tree. Harding fed a belt with tracer rounds into the open receiver. While the Japanese soldier with the Arisaka rifle prepared his position, McKeever locked the traversing mechanisms for a single pull. He was settling a calculated ballistic debt for Corporal Rodriguez and Private Johnson, who were killed 2 days prior. Every fifth cartridge in the linked ammunition belt contained an illuminating tracer compound. This provided a highly visible trajectory line for the upcoming mechanical adjustment. The Bear machine gun weighed exactly 38 kilograms without its heavy mounting tripod. This excessive physical mass absorbed the kinetic recoil of a single discharged shot almost completely. Its closed bolt operating mechanism kept the heavy barrel perfectly static before primer ignition, eliminating upward jump. Across the deep valley, the enemy shooter slowly adjusted his hidden, elevated position. He operated with the relaxed confidence of an infantryman inside a completely secure sector. The physical distance across the open valley significantly exceeded the maximum capabilities of all standard American rifles. All the mathematics of flight time and spin drift came down to a single trigger pull. McKeever centered the telescopic crosshairs directly on the target. He adjusted his hold, watching morning cooking fires send smoke drifting steadily toward the east. A standard machine gun crew would normally unleash a continuous cyclic burst to saturate a wide area. Instead, the heavy weapon delivered one precise sniper shot. A sharp single crack tore through the silence of the tropical valley. The standard 50 caliber armor-piercing projectile weighed 46 grams. It exited the heavy steel barrel at a muzzle velocity exceeding 890 meters per second. The tracer round ignited immediately. It formed a bright red arc, cutting a precise ballistic trajectory high above the dense green canopy of the jungle. The flight path across the open distance took over a full second. The bullet struck the fallen timber exactly 15 centimeters to the left of the Japanese marksman. Heavy wood exploded. Carrying over 17,000 joules of terminal energy, the projectile instantly shattered the thick tropical log. Sharp splinters flew outward like secondary shrapnel. The soldier froze. The supersonic shockwave of the heavy near miss hit him just before the sound of the gunshot arrived. The sniper abandoned his rifle position entirely and scrambled backward into the dark mouth of the cave. The Japanese retreat confirmed the reality of that 15-centimeter deviation. It proved to Lieutenant Phillips that the heavy weapon possessed the capacity for precision terror. The resulting tactical paradox shifted established military boundaries. A platform engineered to scatter hundreds of rounds was transforming Japanese safe zones into precision kill zones. Phillips surveyed the distant ridgeline through his binoculars, noting that all enemy movement across the sector had ceased. The calculated range to those caves measured exactly 1,460 meters. Tactical manuals required the machine gun to cycle 500 rounds per minute for area suppression. Isolating a single shot bypassed this mechanical philosophy of volume fire. The concept of general suppression was replaced by the tactic of pinpoint access denial. Enemy infantry could no longer rely on sheer distance to protect their elevated positions. Safe standoff ranges across the valley simply ceased to exist. The combat equation had changed. Pencils scratched across thick range cards. The new tactical reality required a different kind of engineering. Harding marked reference points on the paper, mapping every visible landmark across the opposing ridge. The distance grid expanded in strict 90-meter increments. It stretched from 1,100 out to 1,645 meters. This precise 90-meter grid created a lethal mathematical net that covered the entire opposite slope. In the evening, McKeever scrubbed the hot barrel of the machine gun. Heat still radiated from the dark steel. The empty Browning receiver weighed 38 kilograms. Every firing solution relied on a solid mount. They rebuilt the position around the M3 tripod. The crew wedged heavy coral chunks tightly against the metal legs. They stacked sandbags to absorb recoil. The combined mass anchored the weapon to the ground. This eliminated any microscopic tremor before the shot. They turned a standard heavy weapons emplacement into a rigid firing platform. Physical reinforcement secured the complex calculations. The improvised long-range shot evolved into a repeatable method. Eliminating the Japanese sniper with a single M2 round forced McKeever to build a fortified heavy sniper nest. This new position altered the platoon's tactical equation. Once the fortified nest was established, the crew shifted focus toward wind deflection calculations and target identification across extreme distances. 2.4 meters. That was the trajectory drop for a 45-gram .50 caliber BMG round traveling at 884 meters per second. McKeever rotated the elevation knobs, counting the sharp metallic clicks of sight adjustments. The heavy barrel fired a tracer round, which traveled for 1.7 seconds before reaching the distant impact zone. The gunner observed the dust signature through his optics and applied a rapid visual correction to the alignment. Engaging targets at 1,463 meters demanded precise calculation. The bullet dropped 2.4 meters under crosswind conditions, roughly equaling the ceiling height in a standard residential house. Hardin extracted deflection tables from an artillery manual, instructing the crew to mix 1 tracer cartridge with 3 standard rounds. This sequencing permitted rapid trajectory assessment without exposing the position through continuous heavy fire. The enemy initially misjudged the incoming strikes, retreating deeper into their cave networks to avoid a perceived concealed sniper team. The calculated precision of the modified weapon platform erased the traditional safety parameters of the battlefield. The garrison abruptly abandoned observation posts that previously maintained continuous watch routines. The Japanese altered their movement patterns across the defensive line. Lieutenant Phillips lowers his binoculars. He loudly dictates the exact coordinates of a distant cave structure. Target distance is 1,280 meters, bearing 075. McKeever instantly traverses the heavy weapon. This pinpoint accuracy fundamentally shifts Lieutenant Phillips's tactical paradigm. Precision fire rewrites the metrics of military supply chains. Conventional suppression devours massive stockpiles. Standard cyclic rates demand 400 to 600 rounds per minute. The familiar long roar of continuous automatic fire vanishes entirely. Sharp single shots replace that heavy, sustained thunder across the valley. The new sniper economy demands extreme mechanical efficiency. McKeever engages targets with short, deliberate bursts. He fires only 3 to 5 cartridges per engagement, severely limiting resource expenditure. A full day of combat consumes barely 2 ammunition belts. Every individual bullet carries immense strategic weight. The logistical burden reverses itself. Frontline calculation of lethality changes, forcing operators to adopt different daily routines. The crew now prioritizes meticulous mechanical upkeep. They spend more time cleaning the barrel than actually shooting. To justify this mechanical upkeep, the crew mastered entirely new technical roles. Harding continuously scans the horizon, translating the movement of every branch into exact ballistic corrections. He evaluates smoke drift and the subtle sway of sparse vegetation to calculate necessary windage adjustments. Harding provides targeting data accurate enough for McKeever to strike hidden combatants on the first attempt. They are a specialized precision rifle team deploying a heavy platform. A standard tripod weighs 20 kilograms, providing the rigid foundation required for these calculated engagements. These targeting methods forced a visible tactical reaction from defending forces leading up to the 26th of June. Marine observers noted a sudden increase in enemy bunker construction across the opposite ridgeline. Japanese infantrymen abandoned their observation posts to remain entrenched underground. Active Japanese sniper positions went silent. The new spotting skills faced a different test on the morning of June 26th. 1,554 meters. At this distance, infantry assumed safety. A Japanese Type 99 machine gun crew relied on this calculation, positioning their weapon behind natural rock cover. The enemy weapon fired a 7.7 millimeter cartridge, dominating the elevation. Harding read the wind speed off the moving vegetation, while McKeever dialed the optic. The Japanese gunner shifted his stance behind the rocks, tilting his torso left to align his iron sights down the ridge. Through the optics, the target narrowed to a single frame. Exactly 45 centimeters of exposed torso filled the glass. McKeever centered the reticle on that predicted space and squeezed the trigger. A 12.7 millimeter projectile weighing 46 grams left the barrel, crossing the valley to impact the gunner directly in the upper chest. Physics dictated the outcome. The kinetic energy of a .50 BMG round at this distance exceeds a modern Kalashnikov rifle firing at point-blank range. The heavy mass shattered bone instantly. The strike neutralized the operator before the sound wave arrived. The remaining soldiers abandoned the fortified position. The Japanese machine gun went silent forever. A single successful shot across 1.5 kilometers altered the behavior of an entire Marine battalion. The triumph of one heavy firing point became a logistical problem for the whole unit. Word of the long-range hit spread among the pinned-down riflemen. Other companies requested similar precision fire support from the heavy weapons platoons. Machine gun crews across the front line started utilizing their M2 weapons for sniper engagements. But this tactical shift exposed the gunners to retaliatory strikes. Japanese observers mapped the grid coordinates of the American sector. The escalating whistle of falling Japanese mortar shells cut through the air. Explosions systematically blanketed the hillside where the weapons were stationed. Relocating the M2 required moving 38 kilograms of steel without the tripod. Instead of retreating, Marines grabbed timber and stacked sandbags to construct fortified overhead cover. They simultaneously prepared alternate positions to ensure continuous operation if the primary emplacements collapsed. This tactical evolution disrupted the established supply chain. Battalion supply quotas never accounted for heavy defensive weapons executing offensive sniper operations. Standard allowances were calculated for repelling infantry assaults. While precision engagements required fewer rounds, the sheer volume of new requests drained the frontline depots. The expenditure of .50 caliber ammunition exceeded all allowable logistical limits. The steady depletion of forward ammunition stockpiles found an unexpected tactical balance. It was offset by a total paralysis of enemy infantry maneuvers. Exactly 7 confirmed kills halted the tactical deployment of an entire opposing battalion. By the end of June, the machine gun crew recorded these eliminations at extended distances. Confirmed hits ranged from 1,188 to 1,554 yards. A standard infantry battalion contained approximately 900 personnel. The opposing forces operated with similar defensive manpower structures, yet this concentration of troops abandoned their established high ground. Empty Japanese observation posts dotted the ridgelines. they refused to hold these fortified vantage points. The persistent threat of targeted fire dictated their movements. The psychological disruption vastly exceeded the physical casualty count. A single heavy weapon forced a distinct shift in regional defensive patterns. The crew bypassed conventional limitations designed for standard area suppression. As Marine elements advanced toward the Japanese ridgelines, the tactical landscape shifted. The gun crew frequently displaced their heavy equipment. They lost the prepared firing platforms that enabled their consistent accuracy. Static tactics became highly unstable during offensive operations. The Japanese command structure analyzed this localized threat. The Japanese military leadership launched a coordinated counterattack on the 2nd of July. A high-velocity projectile struck the sandbag barrier directly next to McKeever's head. The physical answer to American psychological dominance arrived exactly at 06:30 on the 2nd of July. McKeever had just settled behind his heavy weapon for morning observation when the sharp crack of a rifle bullet tore open the barricade. Harding immediately dropped flat to the bottom of the communication trench. The incoming trajectory originated from a concealed elevation 1,280 meters to the northwest. This specific distance demanded advanced ballistics. The Japanese Arisaka Type 99 rifle utilized a heavy 7.7 mm cartridge. Generating a muzzle velocity of roughly 730 meters per second, the weapon maintained a flat flight path well over 1 kilometer. A second round impacted the solid coral parapet. This accuracy indicated calculated optical observation rather than random area suppression. The initial projectile remained lodged inside the coarse fabric, resting exactly 5 centimeters from McKeever's right shoulder. The Japanese command mapped the exact spatial coordinates of the American position. The enemy isolated the threat and deployed a specialized sniper team to eliminate the stationary machine gun crew. The mapped coordinates forced the American detachment into a strict tactical deadlock. For the first 7 days, the crew fired without consequence. Now, a single shifting helmet attracted highly magnified enemy optics. Relocating presented a severe logistical penalty. The heavy machine gun weighed 38 kilograms. Moving the receiver and tripod required immense exertion under direct hostile observation. Setting up a new firing point demanded at least 30 minutes of calibration. The crew needed that time to calculate windage and establish accurate drop charts for a fresh location. Lieutenant Phillips reached the trench, his voice cutting through the ambient gunfire to deliver a verbal report. 2 distinct Japanese sniper teams flanked the position. One team operated from the northwest ridge. Another concealed itself within the northeastern tree line. The enemy carried Type 99 rifles equipped with 4 power optics. These telescopic sights lacked internal windage dials, forcing shooters to rely entirely on reticle holdover. For an entire week, the Marines dictated the pace of the engagement. Now they sat perfectly isolated inside a calculated crossfire. Abandoning the sandbags meant surrendering the sector. Remaining static guaranteed fatal incoming fire. The heavy weapon offered zero mobility, tying the crew to their established firing data. The Marines locked their defensive positions. Both sides initiated a dedicated sniper duel. Instead of moving 38 kilograms of steel under enemy optics, the crew started engineering work. McKeever and Harding assembled a decoy from debris and spare sandbags. They crawled on their hands and knees across the ridge. Standing up meant projecting a clear silhouette against the skyline. They stacked the bags 45 meters east of the real M2 machine gun. The deception required mechanical accuracy to work. For authenticity, they utilized a damaged barrel from a destroyed weapon. They inserted it right into the center of the mound. Finally, a standard steel helmet topped the structure. It simulated a gunner. Standard infantry M1 helmets weigh roughly 1.5 kilograms. Under the camouflage netting, this mass created a realistic shadow profile. Building dummy positions remains a fundamental counter-sniper tactic. The visual trap forces the hostile shooter to fire first. That single action reveals their concealed location. The actual weapon stayed hidden in a shallow coral depression. This lateral shift altered their entire firing geometry. The crew had to recalculate all ballistic data for a displacement of exactly 45 meters. 3 bullets tore through the camouflage netting. They slammed into the sandbags with distinct, muffled thuds. The new firing angle worked perfectly. These 3 shots on the false position on July 4th revealed the Japanese shooter's cover. At 10:15, McKeever caught the faint muzzle flash through his optic. The target hid inside a cluster of boulders. The precise distance measured 1,370 meters to the northwest. Standard infantry tactics demanded volume. A conventional heavy weapons squad would expend hundreds of rounds to suppress that grid square. They would saturate the zone to pin the enemy down. McKeever employed a different formula. He fired exactly 1 round from the M2 platform. A single half-inch projectile crossed the valley gap at 890 meters per second. The bullet struck inches from the target, shattering the solid granite into jagged shrapnel. This single impact bypassed the concept of area suppression entirely. The Japanese sniper abandoned position. A distance of 1,370 meters demanded prolonged aiming phases, exposing the heavy weapon crew to inevitable return fire from hidden positions. 100 rounds. That daily limit defined the operational capacity of the M2 machine gun crew under these constraints. Heavy .50 caliber belts required strict rationing because logistics had completely broken down across the sector. The crew received exactly 2 belts per day. Japanese artillery batteries bombarded the designated landing zones, severing the supply lines and halting the flow of ammunition to the beaches. The battalion exhausted its initial allocation rapidly, forcing the crew to weigh the cost of every trigger pull against their dwindling reserves. A standard 100-round ammunition load weighed roughly 35 pounds, complicating forward transport even before the shelling began. Traditional machine gun doctrine relied on abundant supply to saturate an area, but this specific environment demanded strict conservation. To solve the exposure and spotting problem without wasting precious rounds, Hardin integrated the M2 platform into an external observation network. Forward Marine artillery spotters occupied elevated posts with clear lines of sight over the Japanese defensive positions. They identified targets and adjusted fire impacts, eliminating the need for the machine gunner to remain exposed while tracking bullet trajectories. Artillery observers transmitted precise coordinates in real time. Real-time coordinates from the spotters allowed McKeever to lock on to a record-breaking target. He spent 15 minutes studying a shadow in a dark cave opening. A Japanese gunner manned a Type 99 light machine gun inside. It was July 6th. The target distance stretched to 1,690 meters. This represented the ultimate physical boundary of the weapon. At this extreme range, ballistics become highly complex. The standard armor-piercing projectile leaves the muzzle at 890 meters per second, but drag slows it down rapidly. The required compensation for bullet drop reached 3.6 meters. That equals the height of a standard 1-story building. McKeever manually adjusted the jury-rigged telescopic sight. He calculated the lateral crosswind drift for the 45-gram bullet. He waited for the enemy gunner to settle into a predictable firing position. Then, he pulled the trigger. The flight time of the bullet to the target was 2.1 seconds. The .50 caliber round struck the solid rock face. It hit directly beside the enemy weapon position. Flying stone fragments from the cave wall neutralized the gunner instantly. The Type 99 went completely silent. It stayed inactive for the rest of the day. Artillery spotters confirmed the abandoned position through their high-powered optics. This single precision shot defined the maximum ballistic capability of the heavy machine gun. Equipment remained lying at a distance of 1,690 meters. 1,690 meters defined the technical limit of the improvised scope. On July 8th at dawn, the combat environment shifted. At these extreme distances, the optic could no longer compensate for the natural dispersion of the heavy projectiles. Wind reading became guesswork. Japanese infantry actively adapted to the threat of targeted fire. They overhauled their frontline tactics. Enemy soldiers improved their field camouflage and executed irregular movement patterns to break visual tracking. Japanese squads initiated calculated counter-sniper operations across the sector. An overwhelming American advantage disappeared. The engagement degraded into an equal positional duel. Both sides now projected lethal force across the valley. Tactical success demanded meticulous fieldcraft, not just superior marksmanship. Supply ships never arrived. On the morning of July 8th, the empty horizon revealed a critical calculation. How much ammunition remained for the crew? Exactly 43 rounds. McKeever extracted the heavy brass cartridges from the ammo can, and the metallic clink of the final casing against the steel box confirmed their deficit. Harding crouched beside the weapon mount, deliberately studying their improvised range cards. 43 rounds constituted less than one standard machine gun belt, severely limiting their operational capacity. A kamikaze strike on the naval support fleet offshore had halted all logistical deliveries, while the battalion supply officer provided no timeline for the next shipment. Harding calculated their tactical lifespan based on previous consumption. At their established operational rate, the squad possessed enough ammunition for exactly 6 engagements. After that threshold, the heavy precision platform would fall silent, leaving the infantry without long-range cover. The weapon had previously suppressed enemy mortar spotters across the entire sector. Under the machine gun's control lay 3 kilometers of ridge. 3 kilometers of controlled ridge went completely silent. Lieutenant Phillips brought fresh data from forward observers shortly after sunrise. The reports confirmed a rapid shift in the combat environment. The heavy American weapon no longer dominated the sector. Japanese intelligence correctly identified the reason for this sudden quiet. The American crew had lost their supply chain. This logistical failure immediately cost the Marines their tactical initiative. Phillips reported that enemy troops were preparing a massive counterattack. They expected the assault tonight or early tomorrow morning. The lack of incoming fire provoked the Japanese infantry into brazen daylight movements. Soldiers who had spent days pinned down in trenches now walked openly across the terrain. They exploited the missing suppression fire. The enemy moved through the exact ridges McKeever had previously locked down. They realized the American weapon could no longer afford to shoot at random targets. McKeever completely changed his operational approach. Area denial tactics ended, and harassment fire stopped entirely. The crew conserved their remaining ammunition for critical threats. Only targets with maximum impact justified a trigger pull. The casual precision of the past week vanished. The enemy took full advantage of this forced restraint. The Marines watched the infantry maneuver through zones that were previously suicidal to enter. These bold tactical relocations would become the prologue to the first real test at 10:30. Japanese units began occupying new firing positions. A Japanese crew methodically set up a machine gun over the main supply route. Their visible deployment provided the first real test of the strict ammunition economy regime. The enemy soldiers positioned their Type 99 weapon without urgency, assuming American suppression had ceased. Hardin studied the distant ridgeline through his field glasses, calculating the tactical threat to their logistics network. A compromised supply route meant the forward rifle companies would receive 0 medical supplies and 0 replacement cartridges for their upcoming engagements. The target rested exactly 1,460 meters away across the valley, pushing the optical limits. McKeever settled behind the heavy receiver, meticulously adjusting his telescopic sight to compensate for the crosswind at that extreme ballistic range. Taking this single calculated shot would consume nearly 10% of his entire remaining combat capability. He pressed the butterfly trigger. A heavy 50 caliber bullet struck the primary gunner center mass. A sudden cloud of dry dust kicked up as kinetic force threw the man against the rocky ground. The violent impact disrupted the entire emplacement effort, keeping the logistical artery functional for the infantry below. Yet the mathematical reality of their defense steadily worsened, leaving the heavy weapon team with exactly 38 rounds. The surviving Japanese soldiers abandoned their weapons. Standard suppressive fire demanded 20 to 30 rounds per target. With exactly 38 bullets left in the cans, McKeever had to discard the combat manual. The Japanese infantry began probing the perimeter that afternoon. Small squads advanced just beyond rifle range. They established temporary firing positions and engaged outposts. Standard tactical rules dictated a swift response. Commanders expected a heavy weapon crew to pin down advancing units, forcing them into cover while friendly troops maneuvered. The M2 Browning fired 500 rounds per minute. A proper suppressive burst would consume almost a third of their remaining resources in under 3 seconds. The crew had to sit and watch. Enemy infantry moved freely across the exposed ridgelines. The heavy weapon could reach them without effort. Yet, firing meant emptying the belt for a tactical delay rather than a confirmed kill. The psychological weight of this inaction mounted. McKeever had spent 14 days dictating the pace of the battle, locking down enemy movements. His precision had created an exclusion zone, extending far beyond standard infantry distances. Japanese commanders had restructured their entire approach just to survive the threat. They abandoned fortified lines and restricted daylight movements. Now, the heavy barrel stayed cold as enemy squads maneuvered in plain sight. 2 weeks of American superiority ended. The shift became apparent when a Japanese sniper team killed one forward observer and critically wounded a second. By 1540, enemy marksmen had initiated a systematic elimination of American spotters. Over the course of 30 minutes, these shooters equipped a permanent concealed position. The target sat exactly 1,280 meters away. This distance fell well within the effective range, but utilizing the standard machine gun cyclic rate of 500 rounds per minute was impossible. McKeever needed strict precision. 2 heavy, isolated shots cracked across the otherwise silent sector. The second projectile impacted close enough to force the enemy marksmen to abandon their location. This brief engagement further depleted the weapon's inventory down to 35 remaining cartridges. Japanese infantry units recognized the lack of heavy suppression fire and began advancing across the perimeter. Harding suggested a radical solution. Harding's solution replaced volume with strict accounting. 112 12.7mm rounds for 3 heavy machine gun crews. Stripped of area suppression capabilities, the positions consolidated their remaining resources. Operators broke the metal belts apart by hand. Steel links clinked against receiver covers during the physical recount of the cartridges. Across the defensive perimeter, the collected inventory amounted to slightly more than 1 standard ammunition can, which holds 105 rounds. The Browning cyclic rate reaches 600 rounds per minute. The perimeter had barely 12 seconds of sustained fire remaining. Now, survival demanded a single-shot quota allocation. By 1700 hours, the physical division was finalized based on strict sector priorities. Exactly 45 rounds went to McVeigh's team. Command allocated this specific quota due to their proven precision hit rate. The other teams received the remaining balance. All crews immediately abandoned autonomous operation. Radio networks synchronized target acquisition parameters to prevent overlapping fire. Every individual trigger pull required direct authorization. The Japanese assault began at 21:30. At 21:30, those 112 pooled cartridges dictated the entire defensive protocol. How do you halt a battalion-sized night assault with an empty supply chain? The Marine heavy weapons teams shifted to the precise elimination of enemy command nodes. Mortar fire struck the forward positions, while Japanese infantry probed the American lines across multiple sectors. Enemy machine gun crews established firing points at ranges they previously considered untenable. Japanese sniper units reclaimed abandoned terrain, assuming the American heavy support was permanently suppressed. McKeever ignored the advancing riflemen and initiated a deliberate point-target engagement sequence. A sharp, solitary crack of a heavy round cut through the darkness, replacing the familiar prolonged bursts. He systematically acquired the essential tactical assets supporting the assault. His sights locked on to the observation posts directing the mortar strikes. He dismantled the heavy machine gun crews threatening the infantry and neutralized the snipers targeting American officers. The 45-inch barrel provided sufficient ballistic velocity to penetrate the structural cover of these emplaced positions. Eliminating specific point targets with single projectiles produced a tactical disruption that would normally require thousands of rounds in sustained suppression fire. The assault framework collapsed. Bereft of artillery direction and covering fire, the enemy infantry retreated beyond effective engagement range before midnight. The complete repulse of the July 15th counterattack cost exactly 28 shots. Pieces of white cloth tied to rifle barrels emerged from the limestone caves at dawn. Morning light illuminated the fabric. 28 precision impacts dismantled the midnight counterattack, but they also broke a stubborn 3-week subterranean defense. The garrison received their final ammunition resupply 2 days ago. Logistics no longer mattered. Surrender became a strict mathematical consequence of eliminating safe zones. Distance failed to provide a survival margin. Infantry doctrine mandated deep coral shelters to survive heavy artillery barrages. Now, 50-caliber armor-piercing rounds reached the defenders inside those supposed sanctuaries, bypassing traditional cover entirely. A standard projectile penetrates 22 millimeters of steel plate at 100 meters. Limestone offered zero resistance. Soldiers abandoned their forward firing lines. They huddled in the deepest recesses of the rock complex. The enemy realized their fortified points offered no ballistic protection. Psychological paralysis gripped the ridge on July 15th. Japanese forces ceased massing for counterattacks. Lieutenant Phillips stepped into the forward trench to begin coordinating the surrender protocols. The white flags above the caves triggered a cautious clearing procedure across the ridge. The enemy positions had officially surrendered. Yet McKeever's machine gun remained locked on the target, loaded with a fresh belt of ammunition. He maintained strict overwatch. A 12.7 millimeter round sat in the chamber. Infantry units advanced slowly. Marine patrols moved upward to secure the contested terrain. The physical aftermath of the 3-week siege appeared immediately along the steep limestone trails. Infantrymen navigated past dozens of shallow, improvised graves. Japanese soldiers had buried their dead directly inside the defensive perimeter to avoid exposing digging details to American snipers. The cave entrances revealed the true mechanics of the overnight suppression. The heavy weapon had not simply pinned the enemy down, it disassembled their defenses. A standard 50-caliber armor-piercing projectile carries over 17,000 joules of kinetic energy upon leaving the muzzle. Impact craters gouged deep into the rear walls of the caves proved this physics. The 12.7 millimeter bullets punched straight through standard woven sandbags without deflecting. They penetrated thick, packed earthworks and retained enough velocity to shatter the solid limestone behind them. Fortifications offered zero ballistic protection against this specific caliber. Advancing Marines inspected the damaged firing slits and broken barricades. Safe zones did not exist within the ridge complex. The structural destruction mapped precisely onto the enemy casualty zones. Bullet craters matched bloodstains on the rocks. Those bloodstains provided the exact data Harding needed to calculate the final ammunition expenditure. 430 rounds, 17 confirmed eliminations. Harding walked through the cleared caves, matching his operational logs against the physical body count. He pressed a pencil into the rough paper of his field notebook, tallying 25 additional fragmentation casualties. The casualty rate equaled exactly 10% per fired projectile. This metric represented a statistical anomaly for heavy infantry weapons across the operational theater. Standard suppressive fire doctrine traditionally required gunners to expend hundreds of cartridges merely to pin down one squad. The platform typically consumed standard belts of 100 rounds within seconds, making this conservation entirely unconventional. This specific numerical efficiency translated directly into a broader tactical paralysis across the contested perimeter. The opposing Japanese battalion modified its standard behavior, abandoning observation posts and restricting daylight movement. Enemy commanders diverted engineering resources to construct deeper rock fortifications, draining manpower away from offensive maneuvers. Lieutenant Phillips formally drafted the detailed technical report. Field statistics provided the empirical baseline for a comprehensive tactical submission. Headquarters required immediate codification of these trench adaptations. The rhythmic clatter of a typewriter transferred raw combat data onto official standard forms. Lieutenant Phillips included schematics detailing the M2 platform attachment methods. He documented optics integration alongside precise exterior ballistic calculations. These mounting diagrams initiated a significant doctrinal shift. The documentation birthed the heavy sniper rifle concept within the United States military framework. While headquarters formalized mechanical parameters, officers interrogated captured personnel to gauge defensive degradation. Theater command demanded proof. Combatants confirmed the operational paralysis caused by precision engagements. One captured Japanese corporal provided validation during his debriefing. The marksman described his fear of the weapon firing isolated rounds. He recognized the specific threat vector of single, precise impacts. His testimony verified the complete breakdown of standard infantry defense protocols. Enemy snipers deliberately abandoned optimal firing positions because of a single machine gun. Lieutenant Phillips' technical report and the subsequent prisoner interrogations directly invalidated existing Marine Corps field manuals. Training doctrines mandated continuous volume fire for broad area suppression, yet the harsh battlefield reality now required strict individual shot accountability. Official ordnance documentation restricted the reliable engagement envelope of the weapon to between 730 and 910 meters. The physical evidence collected across the island proved consistent target lethality at 1,640 meters. This exact doubling of the confirmed kill distance reshaped the geometric parameters of the frontline combat zones. The extended effective range reached 1,640 meters. This specific metric meant that Japanese commanders could not safely assemble troop formations any closer than 1.5 kilometers from the American lines. The 38-kilogram M2 machine gun exceeded its designated role. This operational shift forced immediate modifications in ammunition logistics, target acquisition procedures, and crew psychology. Traditional firing methods relied on raw volume, but the precision approach demanded careful resource management. Surrounding Marine crews observed these distinct ballistic outcomes and immediately attempted to replicate the sight mounting techniques on their own hardware. The mechanical adaptation spread laterally across the battalion without formal headquarters approval. It was driven entirely by undeniable tactical yield on the ground. The physical evidence proved that the precision machine gun concept represented a logical evolution of defensive warfare. The initial field trial concluded with a deliberate hardware reset for the upcoming maneuvers. McKeever unbolted the improvised scope from the machine gun. Sunlight faded over the captured limestone ridges of Saipan. The optical mounting bracket came off the receiver. The 3-week field trial ended. Ammunition shortages forced the heavy machine gun out of its standard area suppression role. The supply deficit demanded single-shot precision from a fully automatic weapon. Gunners altered their ballistic math. They shifted focus from volume fire to individual target acquisition. The impact data proved that the 50 caliber Browning exceeded its factory design limits when deployed as a sniper platform. This hardware adaptation set a new baseline for long-range ballistics. The tactical concept survived the Pacific theater. It surfaced again during the static defense lines in Korea and the distant valley engagements of Vietnam. This operational data provided the engineering foundation for dedicated 50-caliber anti-materiel rifles like the Barrett M82. Firing a 45-gram projectile, the weapon delivered precise results. A severe logistical crisis on a volcanic island forced a permanent shift in infantry combat geometry. Marine Corps tacticians analyzed the firing logs from Saipan. They extracted the hit rate metrics. The deployment guidelines changed immediately. These new operational parameters traveled directly to the staging areas. Heavy machine gunners carried the revised ranges into the island assaults on Tinian and Guam. The tactic peaked during the amphibious invasion of Okinawa in the spring of 1945. An unauthorized field improvisation, born from an ammunition shortage, became the standard operating procedure for the Marine Corps.